Hello and welcome to Fatima Today. This show is produced by the World Apostolate of Fatima USA, Our Lady's Blue Army, and brings topics to you, our viewers, related to the events in the world today. We live in tumultuous times when logic seems to have disappeared and uncertainty hangs over us. Our hope on these programs is to address the issues of the day and find solutions through adherence to the laws of God, especially through the message of Fatima. We ask that you subscribe to this podcast. Hello and welcome to Fatima Today. I'm your host, David Carollo. In 2022, the overturning of the infamous 1973 Roe versus Wade decision of the Supreme Court was hailed as a great victory for the pro-life cause, as well it should have been. Many saw the battle as having been won. 49 years after the court decision, there was a feeling that most Americans were in fact pro-life, as statistics showed was the case when this decision was handed down. Half century later, however, inundated with an anti-life culture, this has proven perhaps not to be the case today. Now it seems that most people have bought into the idea that choice is the operable argument. Many are, if not supportive of abortion and other questionable practices of life, at least indifferent regarding this. The fact that these practices end or prevent life does not enter into the equation for many. The forces determined to enshrine these things as rights and law were ready for this day. On the side of life, there have been those who have also made great strides introducing pro-life actions around the nation. One such person is my guest today. Michael New is a political scientist and visiting professor at Catholic University of America and an associate scholar at Charlotte Lozier Institute, the Susan B. Anthony List. With the defeat of Issue 1 in Ohio, we hope to get a perspective on the pro-life strategy going forward from our guest. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And it was, I don't know, I don't think that was too surprising what occurred in Ohio the other day. Perhaps you have a different perspective on it. What is your general feeling on that? It's one of the battlegrounds, obviously, that you fight in.
Well, I mean, it was a disappointment and a setback. I was not sure what to expect, to be honest. The fact it lost didn't surprise me. I mean, one thing I know from studying direct democracy and ballot propositions is that people who are undecided tend to vote no in the end, more likely than not. So the polls showed it was close, kind of indicated to me that it was probably likely to lose. There was a big poll of undecided voters. And again, we know from just past initiative campaigns that when people are undecided, they tend to vote no more likely than not. So I wasn't really, shocked by the outcome. I do want to shout out the Ohio pro-lifers who did work hard. Money was raised, a campaign was run. There was a good rally on Sunday featuring Abby Johnson, Bishop Strickland, and Jim Caviezel.
Right.
So, Ohio pro-lifers certainly did their part and, did work hard to try to get this through. But we're not, as I always tell my pro-life friends, we are never promised a smooth or easy glide path to victory. There's going to be setbacks, disappointments, aggravation along the way. But none of us signed up for the pro-life movement because we thought it would be easy.
Yeah, that's for sure. And that's really what it's all about. I think that, as Catholics, we understand that. Our mission, our message is through, we as the World Apostolate of Fatima, founded as the Blue Army many years ago, we're not per se a pro-life group. We're a Catholic group. And as that, we are pro-life. And pro-life across the board. And that's really what it comes down to. My wife and I, for many years, have had an association, Fool Sisters of the Poor. So we have been very much involved in the life, issues. I was on their board of advisors at one point, and it's like life from conception to natural death. Well, I'm afraid our society doesn't see it that way anymore, and the fight has been out there. But I felt that the overturning of Roe versus Wade again was really just the beginning in the pro-life battle. For years, these politicians hid behind a prohibition on enacting legislation for life. You know that better than I do. It was a comfortable time for them, as I see it, because they could say, no, I'm pro-life, but there's nothing I can do about this, And you've certainly been active in countering this. Do you see this, and as I do, and are you now do you think we have a more truthful period, at least in the dialogue on this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think that abortion was a very easy issue for pro-life politicians and pro-life elected officials. They could take a stance, but at the end of the day, we knew that prior to Dobbs, the Supreme Court would strike down, most laws that really did provide protection for preborn children. We could tinker at the margins. We could do things with funding. We could do things with parental involvement. We could do things with waiting periods. These things are all pretty popular and widely supported. But our pro-life politicians didn't really have to risk much for us. Again, they really couldn't do much that would be upheld by the Supreme Court. Now that's changed. Now we're we're firing with real bullets, and we can do certain things to protect preborn children. And some people have stepped up. I mean, in about 14 states, preborn children are protected. Depending on kind of the current status of litigation, there's probably 3 or 4 other states with gestational age limits in place. There's going to be litigation that's going to be kind of hashed out about in some of these states. So, we have had some people who've done the right thing. At the federal level, it's been, I think, disappointing. I think there's been a lot of Republicans, both at the House and Senate, not all, but many, who just want to pass us off to the states. We did our job. We got Roe v. Wade overturned, and we don't really see a federal role, or at least much of a federal role, in protecting preborn children. And I think that's wrong. I think that protecting the weak, innocent, vulnerable is responsibility for all levels of government. So there's many Republicans, unfortunately, who just want to kick this off to the states. We're seeing, I think, in my opinion, a lot of confusion from the current group of Republican presidential candidates. There are some that are willing to support a 15-week ban or other kinds of federal limits. Others aren't. And that's been disappointing. Obviously, the campaign, is kind of just started. That Iowa and New Hampshire are months away, but it's just a little bit disappointing. We're not seeing kind of more support, better support from our Republican elected officials.
Yeah, I think that's really what it's about. I mean, there's just not. Everybody wants to get on the. It's funny right now. I mean, let's say it was the Trump administration that got the members of the Supreme Court that finally did this. And I think they're like looking at that whole administration, trying to keep an arm's length away from it, but without acknowledging the realities that it was during that time, and with the support of the Republicans, primarily in Congress, who put these people on the bench, allowed this to happen. And I think but again, we it's hard to look at and again, to be too political, is that it's like because there's many in the Republican Party also who really are not pro-life in their hearts. Okay? And I think, that's, again, the battle that I think we fight, is to get it into the hearts of people. We're an apostolate of prayer, and our apostolate is to get people to get in their hearts the idea to live in accord with the laws of God. And I think, and that's, I think your work in bringing in politicians, I hate that word politicians, but bringing in people into public office that have this fundamental belief in the sanctity of life, I think is really, that's the battle all the way along. I know, like in your work, like Susan B. Anthony in that with the list, I'm sure you have certain criteria you look at, not just somebody gets up and says I'm pro-life, right? But probably has to have some type of track record of being effective in what they're saying. Is that true?
Well, I don't really, I kind of handle the research and writing into things. I don't really make decisions about recruiting candidates or candidate endorsements. I mean, I will say that one strategically good idea that Susan B. Anthony has had since our inception is we're really interested in trying to help out pro-life women. I think if men are the only people, or at least the only elected officials speaking out on this issue, that the optics don't look good. I think there's certainly an important role for men to play in this movement, but politically, it just helps out a lot if women are speaking out, especially if women are taking the lead. So that's kind of one, I think, a good idea we've had, and we have succeeded in getting many very strong pro-life women elected to local offices, to Congress, and to the Senate. So that's been a blessing. So typically there is a questionnaire candidates have to fill out. We do want to see a track record. You just can't jump it down and say, me, I'm pro-life. No, we do want to see some evidence that you've voted that way, or you've done some work to, advance the culture of life before we offer you an endorsement, or we offer you some financial support. I think that you're right. There's many opportunistic people in politics. And I think as the Republican Party has just become more conservative, a lot of people have just adopted the pro-life stance out of expediency. And it's really not what they believe. And that means they're, not willing to risk much for us, or in some cases do much for us. So, and I think, again, I don't mean to dismiss all elected officials. There are some people in Congress who are very strong on this issue, who care a lot, who want to advance this issue and do certain things to build a culture of life. But it's important, I think when we decide who to vote for and, who to support, that we really look for people who do, truly care and aren't just taking this position out of political expediency.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, of course, I come from Chicago, and last week I was at the Napa Institute, and I had a nice conversation with Dan Lipinski, of course, who was the very last Democrat pro-life member of the House of Representatives, and he went down. They took him down eventually after how many election cycles, But you know what? He went down with his chin up and said, he was not going to change his pro-life position, and that was it. And that was the position that knocked him out. I think he was pretty popular on other issues. And I give credit. We need people like that, okay, on both sides of the aisle, to tell you the truth, who are there for principle, not necessarily because, again, my party's pro-life or mine is pro-choice, whatever, because I think that's the problem, obviously, in our system of government, And I guess another question I have is, that obviously the Catholic Church has never strayed, from the position of being pro-life, and that life must be protected from conception and natural death. We understand that. But some in the church are weak on this, very much so, and, I mean, certainly we remain very loyal to the church. We're a public association of the faithful and all that. But I do see, I think lack of strong leadership in putting back people, especially people identify as Catholic, some politicians, many, as we know, how do you and how do your organizations look at that, and how do you try to counter that a little bit?
I mean, as far as what the church, it's challenging. That I don't really see a lot of clergy or members of the hierarchy, openly contradicting church teachings. The disappointment that I and others often have is they don't prioritize the teachings of the sanctity of life issues. I'm a cradle Catholic. My parents probably started making me go to mass when I was 5 or 6. So I've been going to mass for about 40 years. If you kind of throw out special masses said during either March for Life weekend or Respect Life Sunday, very rarely do I ever hear a priest talk about abortion from the pulpit during a homily. I mean, it's probably been less than 10 times, and probably honestly maybe less than 5 times. Again, excluding special masses said during March for Life weekend or Respect Life Sunday. Yeah. So again, I just wish, our priests, our bishops, would prioritize this more than they do. And we have some who are excellent. I mean, there are some who are very articulate, and there are some priests and bishops who do a terrific job. I just wish we had more of them.
Well, that's the whole point. I mean, I think, that's some of these people have to hear what you're doing, the positions you're taking are wrong, and for the sake of your soul, I need you need to change it. And then they can decide, do they stay within the bosom of the church or not? I think many people are hiding behind Catholicism or by their nominal Catholicism, which in fact, and it's not just Catholics. I mean, it happens. There are people in Protestant churches and the same thing. They're also triangulating into this type of thing, and this is not a Christian position. It's not just we as Catholics who look at that, but you've done some interesting things though. For example, you promoted tax limitation amendments, I think, such as Colorado Taxpayer Bill of Rights, I believe. I guess, it brings me back to that longstanding, Hyde Amendment. I had the honor of meeting Henry Hyde years ago, and he was animate about that. Okay. And I mean, of course, there were always organizations like Planned Parenthood who were able to, triangulate around it by probably getting tax money for other things they do and then moving money into abortion. There's always been that type of thing. But, I just wonder, this is like, the reality is, there's a public relations war that goes on out there, and it's in that battle for life. And I think the financial thing is something that, I mean, it chews at me as a taxpayer. It's bad enough these things are there, but the fact that I'm being forced to pay for it. Do you take that position as being strong, where you have to, keep that in the minds of people, that they're not only doing this, forcing this, but taking your money to do it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a great talking point for us. I think that, pulling on taxpayer funding for elective abortions is something that most people clearly oppose. And there's a good body of research that shows that. We have a lot of polling data on that. And, I think that, the pro-lifers in the 1970s were very wise to prioritize this. I think in the aftermath of Roe v. Wade, we knew we probably couldn't overturn Roe in the short term. We wanted to do things to protect the conscience rights of taxpayers in the short term and protect some preborn children. And the Hyde Amendment has had a great track record of success. I think that, before Dobbs, our best legislative tool for stopping abortion was defunding it. And there's just good research showing once you quit paying for abortion with taxpayer dollars, abortion numbers go down. Even pro-abortion groups agree with this. Guttmacher, they don't exactly shout this to the rooftop, but their own research shows pretty clearly that once states quit paying for abortion through the state Medicaid program, abortion rates fall. And I've done a lot of research on this. My most recent estimates indicate the Hyde Amendment has saved over 2.5 million lives since 1976. Wow. So there's, people, millions of people walking around today who owe their life to the Hyde Amendment. People should not believe this idea that, pro-life political involvement is a waste or it's all for naught. Millions of lives have just been saved just by getting the federal government out of the business of paying for elective abortions through Medicaid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it's by holding the money back, by putting it into the minds of people, that this is wrong. I mean, the 40 Days for Life, they've been praying in front of the abortion clinics. My wife and I have participated in that many times over the years. And, people say, well, what do you accomplish by just standing out there and praying the rosary in front of an abortion clinic? What you do is somebody sees you. Okay. Yep. Somebody knows you're doing it. And there are times that, that we've had people come by and want to talk and just say, why are you, what is your position here? It's because we just want to save lives, and I think that's what it's all about. It's the sanctity of life. It's that and I guess, my generation, I think I'm a bit older than you are. We dropped the ball. I came of age in the 70s, and I will tell you something that it was a time of just a real moral collapse. And of course, Roe versus Wade came out of the 70s. So what does that tell you? And it was just that whole idea that this is like, if it feels good, do it kind of thing. And I think we really paid the price as a society for that, because I mean, the statistics, I mean, how many babies, how many lives have been lost through abortion, and how many more we don't even really know about through like chemical abortion. And of course, contraception. I mean, especially, the chemical contraception and that. And it's, and then at the same time, we have, the West in general is disappearing, and the Fatima message, which is what I speak on and promote as the executive director of this apostolate. One thing Our Lady said that was very telling. She said, nations could be annihilated. And of course, the first thing we thought of was nuclear war, right? And that's all possible. Look at how we're annihilating ourselves look at our this horrible birth rates in this world, in the West in general. I mean, I read a stat just last week that in Italy, there was almost twice as many deaths as there were births in this past year, maybe not quite, but close, And I think that's very, and I do a lot in Western Europe and in Eastern Europe, and then here in the United States, I mean, you see family sizes, all of my friends came from bigger families. It's not the case anymore. So it's just a general disrespect for life, okay, or maybe that there's less of a necessity for life, and it has to go with the whole, I think, the selfishness of our age. I don't know, how self-fulfilling that actually is when you think about that. When children are probably the biggest asset anybody can have, but we don't look at it that way, and that is a tool of the devil, no doubt about it. So. But I guess, going forward, I mean, I guess we talk. One thing that does bother me a lot is, as a constitutionalist, I look at how this vote in Ohio went, and I think one of the things, the big thing, it's like they paint it as being like an attack on democracy, whereas anybody should be able to vote on any issue, but we have constitutions, we have absolutes that we're supposed to live by. And that's why we have a constitution in this country. And unfortunately, that constitution has been attacked so strongly with this whole idea of direct democracy. And I think that was what came into play, I think, here in Ohio, where, you have a right to make this decision, and they'll make those decisions in November. But the amount of money that's going to be poured into that amendment that they're going to push through in November in Ohio. And it's going to be brutal. It truly is. You know that better than I do. You probably have the real numbers. And I think we have to, people have to understand that we have absolutes so that people don't make decisions out of emotion, and they look in and see that there's that this is my issue, and I'm just going to vote on it, not looking at the bigger picture. I don't know. I mean, how do you look at that? I mean, as you know, as a person who fights that fight on in the state level, many places right now.
I mean, constitutions are important and they should be hard to change.
Yeah.
I think that, and if you're going to change the Constitution, I think it should require a fairly broad consensus. And I don't think that allowing 50% plus one to change the Constitution is a good idea. You see examples of that from California, where I used to live. The problem is that, voters can like something individually, but there's trade-offs in place that they may not be thinking about. California voters want both low property taxes and all kinds of lavish public services.
Yeah.
You can't have both.
Yeah.
And they may want them, each piecemeal, but a legislator has to actually weigh the trade-offs a bit more than your average voter does and say, okay, if we cut taxes here, we can't afford these services, or if we have these services, we have to pay more in taxes. And those voters often don't really, think of those things all that carefully. Sometimes an idea comes up they happen to like, and they don't really think about the whole picture. So again, I think that, requiring a broader consensus to amend the Constitution is perfectly reasonable. It's very difficult to amend the U.S. Constitution, as it should be. An amendment requires 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, 3/4 of the state legislatures. We've only amended our Constitution 27 times since the country was founded. And I think that's reasonable. On the other hand, the Ohio Constitution has been amended almost 200 times. That it's about, I think, almost 9 times as long as the U.S. Constitution. It just shouldn't be set up that way. So, I think that the issue one was reasonable. Pro-lifers had our reasons for supporting it, but I think there were kind of good reasons otherwise to support such a measure. It didn't pass, obviously. It's a setback, it's a disappointment, but we shouldn't despair. And as I kind of pointed out in my National Review Online article, it's not going to be easy, but I do think Ohio pro-lifers still do have a pathway to victory in November.
That would be wonderful. I mean, and to win it in spite of this would be beautiful, because it is. I think again we have to focus on what this is calling for, because this goes beyond abortion. What they're promoting there is going to go way beyond just abortion, and I mean it's going to take parental rights away from everything if it's allowed to go through. I mean, that law better than I do. And what else is in there that you see that is a danger? I mean, overall.
I think that not only with abortion, but I think that it may have some impact on, transgender policy. I think that, frankly, children should not be allowed to take, pills or drugs that, suppress hormones or, puberty blockers. I think that, first of all, I think it should be illegal. But I certainly think if that does happen, if it is legal, it should have parental care should be involved. I mean, you're talking about children making, life-changing decisions that in some cases can't necessarily be reversed.
Yeah.
And the notion that we just let children make, life-changing decisions, before their 18th birthday just is absurd to me. I certainly think that there needs to be a parental role, and I would even go so far as to argue that, it should be banned until, one's at least 18. Children aren't always in the best situations to make these kinds of decisions for themselves. So I think it could certainly have an impact there. It could even have an impact on things like, contraception and contraception policy, things like sterilization. I think that this is a real Pandora's box. And what's worse is it's a constitutional amendment. And once things are in the Constitution, they're tough to change, tough to get out. I mean, a statute can be amended, revised in certain ways, repealed. Constitutional amendments are hard to change. And I think it could cause some permanent changes to Ohio public policy that will clearly, undermine a culture of life, and it clearly have bad consequences for a lot of people.
Yeah. I lived in Ohio for about 4 years back in the late 70s, and it kind of breaks my heart, because I always thought that Ohio was I lived in Cleveland, in the suburb. I worked in the city and lived in the suburbs of Cleveland, but I always, felt Ohio was a conservative state. It was like one of these, very Catholic, a lot of Catholic people there, and I was very ethnic, and I that's why I was surprised when I saw this battle playing out there. But it's everywhere. But if you look at the areas where it won, it was in the big urban areas, okay? And I think that the narrative that's put out there by the media, it just paints a picture that is so unrealistic to people. And I think that, again, the whole thing came out about this idea that this pure democracy idea that we're so stuck on, I think, in this country. We have to look at that again. I mean, there are ideals that are bigger than we are, and we have to acknowledge it, and not only acknowledge it, but embrace these things, because that's our that's what is the core of thing. We don't change for win. And I think that's what this type of thing is going to bring on. Unfortunately, I pray that's it's one in Ohio. I think it's going to be, and I know you're, and so many other pro-life people are fighting hard. But how does our side, if you will, saying that the media stokes these emotions, as I just said, to such a great degree. How do we counter that? We don't own the media. Let's be realistic. We do have our outlets, but we don't have the big horn that's out there. What is the strategy that the pro-life movement, people like yourself, are looking to counter this current?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, the media is not our friend. They're not our ally. Thankfully, they're not as powerful as they used to be. I mean, thankfully, we do have alternative outlets like podcasts like this one, and we do have conservative and Christian media outlets that we can certainly that will allow us to present our arguments. I think a lot of it though isn't necessarily going to be a media strategy. It's going to be a grassroots strategy. I think it's going to be knocking on doors, talking to friends, phone calls. I think everybody in Ohio who's a Christian should approach their pastor, their priest, and ask them to talk about this amendment, during the church services, during Mass. And if the pastor or the priest won't do it, talk yourself. You can't sit this one out. And you don't need to be Superman. You don't need to be an expert on everything. You just need to be a pro-life person of good conscience and goodwill, and stand up before people in your church and explain why this is important. If you don't do it, maybe nobody else will. So again, people sometimes have to do things outside their comfort zone. It's not always easy. I help run a pro-life sidewalk housing ministry outside the DC Planned Parenthood. I joke it's both the best and the worst thing I do every week. It's not, most of the pro-life work I do is fun. I like writing, researching. I love podcasts like this. I love to hear myself talk. These are all fun, pleasant things to do. Work myself in front of the Planned Parenthood for a couple of hours. No, that's not fun. I don't get much support from passersby, neither do my friends. Our batting average isn't great, but it's not zero either. And even when we don't succeed, we're still a powerful witness. We still prayed. Our prayers are heard. And we're still a strong witness. And, conversations do happen. Good things do happen in front of us sometimes, because we showed up that day. So I would just encourage, pro-lifers in Ohio, elsewhere, get out of your comfort zone. This is winnable, but it's going to take a lot of effort. If you can, whatever you can do to help, do. Whether it's financial, whether it's time. And again, I still would encourage everyone, approach your pastor, approach your priest, ask them to talk about it. And again, if they won't, volunteer yourself and make the best case you can to your fellow church members.
We're on a winning team. There's no doubt about it. It truly is. I mean, we do have, this is a battle that will be won eventually. I mean, but again, there is a price that's being paid as we go along. And I don't know. I just believe that, of course, again, we promote the message of Fatima, which talks about the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, through prayer and sacrifice. And that's really what it comes down to. I think, God will, they say, when will God intervene? Well, he intervenes through us. We have to get out there, like doing what you're doing, getting out of your comfort zone, being willing. That's not my thing. I'm not always happy to be out and do, but sometimes just a comment that might be made to you lets you know that you're reaching somebody. Mm-hmm. I think we have to show the hypocrisy of these organizations, and primarily Planned Parenthood. I mean, they have just, I don't have to tell you the history of the organization. But I mean, one pro-lifer pointed out was at an abortion clinic, and on the wall they had the sign "Black Lives Matter." It was in an urban area, right? And then probably 70% of the young women going in there were minority women. Well, excuse me, how much do they matter if you're doing this? Okay, if they really matter, close down, and stop murdering these people, because that's really what's happening. And it's and it's sad, because which obviously the founding of that was very much a racist thing, and it's just I think, again, we have to, like you said, get out of our comfort zone. We have to understand that there's more to being a pro-lifer, of being a Catholic. And in a way, I'm not happy about these setbacks that have happened in the last year since the Dobbs decision. But I will tell you. And I gave a talk about a year ago at an event, and I said, now we're going to see if we're truly pro-life or not. And I'm not a pro-life advocate per se. But I was saying, now we're going to see if we're actually a pro-life country. If are we going to put our money where our mouth is? And to a great degree, it's been done. Like you said, there are states where abortion has been, pushed back and even illegal, which God bless them for doing that. And there are other places. I mean, I'm here in New Jersey, which is, not the most pro-life state. Let's be realistic. And I come from Chicago, from Illinois, which is very bad in that regard. But but you don't give up. We just don't give up, and I think that's really what it comes down to. And I really applaud people like yourself who are out there and kind of just in fighting the fight. Okay, and inspiring us to do so, because that's really what it takes. We have to. We just have to be there and be willing and stand up at the right times. But anything else you'd like to tell our listeners? I mean, as far as what we little encouragement going forward here.
Yeah, sure, lots of encouragement. I mean, one thing I'll tell pro-life people is that overturning Roe was a big victory, but we were never promised a smooth glide path to victory. We're still in this fight. There's going to be setbacks, disappointments, aggravations. Don't get discouraged. As a movement, we've done a lot of good. I mean, one thing I always talked about, even when Roe v. Wade was on the books, is success we had getting abortion numbers down. Between 1980 and 2017, we cut the abortion rate down by more than half. And that gets almost no attention. Only a handful of analysts like me who follow these numbers closely talk much about this at all. So if the abortion rate today was what it was back at its peak in 1980, there'd be 1 million more abortions taking place every year. And one thing that's interesting is the reason why abortion numbers have fallen isn't because unintended pregnancy rates have fallen all that much. The unintended pregnancy rates have fluctuated. What has happened is that a higher percentage of women who face unintended pregnancies carry that pregnancy to term. And we actually have that data from Guttmacher, which again is not sympathetic to us at all. So I mentioned this to every pro-life audience that listen to me. Like roughly in the 90s, half of all unintended pregnancies were aborted. The most recent data we have indicates only a third now are aborted. And I always mention this because it shows that pro-life efforts are effective. If more unintended pregnancies are being carried to term, it's because of one of three reasons. Either changing hearts and minds, we're offering more help for pregnant women in need, or we're passing strong pro-life laws. So it's pro-life education, service, legislation. It all adds up. So, again, we're going to have setbacks. We're going to have aggravation along the way. It's not going to be a smooth glide path to victory. But we've done a lot of good. The fact we've got the abortion rate down by more than half really does show that our efforts are paying some real dividends. We're saving lives every day. So, again, don't be discouraged by what happened in Ohio on Tuesday. Keep building a culture of life. Do what you're called to do, and don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone. Sometimes we need to do things that aren't always fun and pleasant or easy, but I think God does bless and reward those efforts, and there's often a good payoff in the end.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it, Michael. And I think it's a battle we're going to win. It's we know how it works. Back from St. Paul saying we're going to win, Our Lady at Fatima saying Immaculate Heart will triumph. We're on the right side of this battle. We just have to stay the course. And as my dear friend, the late Father Andrew Apostoli, used to say to us, he said, Dave, the devil doesn't shoot at decoys. And we're all going to have we're going to be hit a lot with things. And that's fine because we're doing the right thing. But, well, Michael, I want to really thank you so much for giving us that perspective of hope and for being on today. The fight for life is a fight of our day. We know that. And you mentioned Bishop Strickland earlier, and he's been quoted as saying that this is the hill to die on. So, and he's right. I mean, this is it, because if we don't have life, you don't have anything else. You start with life, So again, thank you for being here today. And thank you folks for watching, and please subscribe to this podcast. Thank you.